To the Development Control meeting of the 24th of June 2020. The committee, Councillor Frank Cant, Chair, Councillor Mark Payne, Vice Chair, Councillor Afrasiab Anwar, Councillor Gordon Birtwistle, Councillor Saeed Chowdhury, Councillor Ivor Emo, Councillor Sue Graham, Councillor Sarah Hall, Councillor John Harbour, Councillor Alan Hosker, Councillor Mohammed Ishtiaq, Councillor Anne Kelly, Councillor Neil Mottershead, and Councillor Jeff Sumner. We've got 2 requests to speak this evening from David Waddington, who's here in attendance at the meeting, and a written submission from Nick White. Supporting officers Paul Gattrell, Head of Housing and Development Control, Alec Hickey, Planning Manager, Janet Philbin, Senior Planner, David Talbot, Senior Solicitor, Alison McEwen, Democracy Officer, Mark Hindman, streaming the meeting, and then we've got observers, Christine Wood, Amanda Rumbelow, and Molly Wiggin. Okay, Chair?
Yes, thank you, Alison. So straight onto the agenda. The first thing is apologies.
We've had apologies from Councillor Marcus Johnston, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And next item, minutes from the last meeting.
I'll move those, Chair.
Yeah, we seconder.
I'll second it, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Moving on, additional items of business.
There are none, Chair.
Right, thank you. And any declarations of interest?
I haven't received any to date, Chair.
Right, we'll assume, right. And exclusion of the public.
As per agenda, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Next is the list of deposited plans and applications. And the first of all, we've got we've got 1 speaker tonight and 1 written submission. The speaker is Mr. David Waddington. I will invite him to address committee. You have 5 minutes. I presume, Alison, you'll be timing it, will you?
Yes, I will, Chair.
Thank you.
Just give me 1 second. I didn't have my watch set up.
Right.
Thanks for that. Could you, everybody, all hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
We can, David.
Good. Excellent.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Start when you're ready.
Okay, well, all being well, I did send this out to everybody on the committee, so if you've had a chance to read it, then it should be reasonably familiar to you. Right, okay, so our objection to the proposed development as follows. The National Planning Policy Framework at Highways establishes that development should not go ahead if it creates unacceptable impact on the highway network. We believe that this development would substantially exacerbate existing problems. The current estate was never designed to have a massive influx of houses bolted onto it. This is equivalent to bolting HS2 onto Manchester Road Station, in our opinion. The only road up to the proposed development from Hillingdon Road to Stanton Drive is steep and winding, particularly during adverse weather conditions, where residents park on the road and pavement to have ready access to the road. In snowy and icy flood conditions, it's already difficult to navigate the road. This also obstructs pedestrian access and causes particular problems for people with disabilities and those with young children. It could be extremely difficult to get a fire engine to the proposed development, risking possible danger to life. There has been recent flooding with water flowing down the road through gardens, and please refer to the submitted new independent hydrology report which I sent out. In terms of congestion, air quality, pollution, noxious fumes, and the flow of traffic, nothing has changed in these respects since the last application, which was refused. The access to the site hasn't changed, and another access point needs to be added to the development before this application is considered again. There are 4 primary schools and 1 secondary school, which are all full, served by the routes, which will experience increased congestion due to the influx of potentially 260 extra cars. There are already major problems for traffic around school times, The safety of our children should be paramount here, and extra traffic is a major safety concern. There's currently major traffic congestion at peak times from Standon Hall Drive, Briarcliff Road, Hillingdon Road, Marsden Road, and especially at Casterton Avenue, Eastern Avenue, Briarcliff Road roundabout. Any additional traffic will make the situation far worse with additional pollution and safety aspects. In addition, bus services are low frequency with restricted operating hours and long walking distances past idling traffic and parked cars. We noted the comment in a recent report that the trend for future was building hundreds of thousands of new homes in places where nearly everybody tends to jump in a car, with the health and public realm consequences ignored, despite fine words of the NPPF. Went on to say that the layout in many areas of new homes was not right for serving by bus, with roads too narrow for buses to get through the estate, plus problems with parked cars. Further to the reference above flooding, and the light of problems caused by overflows from the stream that flows through Standon Hall Park and is culverted under Rockwood Close and Briarcliff Road, we were concerned about the absence of a thorough hydrology report. We propose that before the application is considered, the developer and council should accept responsibility for any future flooding problems, including cost of rectification and clean-up, which result from any planned development. We have since submitted a detailed independent hydrology report on this subject, which makes for grim reading, funded by the residents, which contradicts the developer's solution to this problem. The proposed development does not take full and proper account of the climate change emergency declared by Burnley Council. Specifically, we note the NPPF makes it clear that we should be building places that engender healthy lifestyles, that we should encourage active travel. We're supposed to be building low carbon future. We're supposed to build around sustainable transport. The report goes on to conclude, many of the places I've seen is taken in exactly the opposite direction. On all counts, we believe that these comments apply directly and exactly to this development. The proposed development would amount to over-provision of new housing in the Briarcliff area, and even the national press has reported that the most unnecessary house building is in the north of England. In addition, with the current 12-week-long COVID-19 pandemic, the area above Standon Hall has been vital for the health and well-being of the community, allowing safe and practical social distancing exercise without anybody having to drive to parks and open spaces. Briarcliff pupils leaving this year are currently being allocated schools as far away as West Craven in Barnoldswick. This proposed development would greatly increase the number of car journeys to get pupils to school up to 15 miles away. Both primary and secondary schools in the area are full. There's been no consultation with the schools about an increase in pupil numbers. The council cannot wash its hands of this and put the onus on Lancashire County Council. Briarcliff Medical Centre has serious concerns, with an unprecedented response, the contents of which I have on good authority have never been seen before in relation to a planning application, and are currently unable to accept a significant number of new patients. With this document, which is the NHS consultation response, and I paraphrase, the Trust hospitals at full capacity, there are limited opportunities for it to further improve hospital capacity utilisation. Section 23 headlines, the existing service care and infrastructure is unable to meet the initial demand that will be generated as a result of the proposed development. Similarly, LCC
Could you finish up quickly, please?
Yeah, okay, well, I'm nearly finished. LCC Highways have confirmed development would mean a number of already congested local road junctions will be operating in excess of capacity. We feel that due to the reasons outlined above, the fact that there is little or no change to the original proposal which was rejected, the reason for rejection is still valid. The plan for Burnley states 120 houses, not 130. The application is only reduced by 3 houses. The additional hydrology report, which I trust you have had sight of now, also makes it clear that this proposed development is unsustainable and the application for planning should be refused. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on now to the application.
Sorry, Chair. We've got the written submission.
Yeah, yes.
So we've now been joined as well by Imelda Grady, Democracy Officer, who was having trouble with internet. So this is a letter from Nick White, who is on behalf of the applicant. Dear councillors, planners, Countryside Homes Northwest are a locally based developer whose latest application has been handled with care, consideration and respect for what we have been asked to achieve by your Burnley Borough Council planning team. On the 30th of March 2017, the historic local plan was voted on and agreed by your full council and passed to the Secretary of State for validity to provide deliverable sites for new homes employment and steer the future of the borough. Saxyfield was one of those sites agreed by your full council. This was legally bound, sealed and fully adopted on the 31st of July 2018. We have again adhered to every request from your planners, who in turn gained full approval again from your council's own professional consultants, confirming what has been put in place will ensure a development that is sympathetic to its surroundings and providing aspirational homes. With regards to the Section 106 agreement requirements, we have committed again to the 100% payment of the education tax, the affordable housing as an on-site allocation, plus the payment for upgrading the children's play park. Saxyfield is an allocated site and one which will contribute to the council's housing supply and which will make a valuable contribution to delivering much needed homes and affordable housing for the borough. You're all aware the previous application was refused on highways grounds, even though LCC Highways raised no objection. The appeal has been submitted and is now running. LCC Highways have once again raised no objection to the present application. Having reduced the number of units back from 130 to 117 after feedback from your planners and addressing all concerns along with support from LCC, your planning case officer has again recommended this site for approval without delay. We hope you, the members, are minded to do the same. Thank you. And that ends the submission.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. So moving on to the agenda item, which is the land to the north of Higher Saxyfield Street, Briarcliff. And I think Ms. Philbin is going to present the report.
Yes, can you just confirm that you can hear me first of all, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Well, I can.
Right, okay. Right, yes, my name is Janet Philbin and I am the planning case officer that has dealt with this application and also the previous application on this site. The application is a resubmission of a similar application for 130 dwellings, which the council refused on traffic grounds in November last year. An appeal has been lodged against this refusal, but the applicant has made a resubmission in order to attempt to address the concerns of the council and has indicated that in these circumstances that the current appeal would be withdrawn. In brief, the site is 5.1 hectares and, as one of the larger of the 32 sites that are allocated for residential development in the local plan, a development scheme has been submitted to deliver housing on the site. The key changes from the previous application are a reduction of 10% in the number of houses from 130 to 117, and this has led to a greater amount of open space within the site, which we planted as meadow, and a revised transport assessment and addendum report to deal with the highway objections report that was submitted with the last application. The proposed scheme produces the following benefits which haven't been disputed. 10% of the development, that is 12 houses, would be affordable houses, which would be intermediate housing, which is a shared equity type of tenure. Up to 30% of the houses, that is 35 of the houses, would comply with the adaptable homes, the optional part M42 standard of building regulations in terms of being adaptable for the future changing needs of occupants. And there would be new areas of public open space amounting to 0.96 of a hectare, which is approximately 20% of the whole of the site and a contribution towards improving existing play areas in the local area. Quality new housing with an attractive layout, and any energy efficient dwellings, all of which are tangible benefits. It would also adequately mitigate against the impacts of new housing by contributions to education. The main issues that have been explored further since the previous application have concerned highway impacts and drainage. Firstly, in terms of highway impacts, the revised transport assessment and addendum report has addressed the points raised by the previous objectors report. These are discussed fully in the agenda report before you. The level of impact from the development amounts to up to 1 vehicle trip per minute from the development site in the morning peak hour period, and less than 1 vehicle trip per minute arriving at the site in the peak afternoon period. The Highway Authority has assessed the additionally rigorous information that has been submitted in the revised transport assessment and addendum report and affirms that the impact from this development will not lead to a severe impact, and a severe impact is the test which is imposed by the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, where it says that a development should not be refused unless it has a severe impact in transport terms. The reduction in numbers to 117 dwellings only reinforces this position. Secondly, on the issue of drainage, a report on behalf of the residents has been submitted by KRS Environmental, and this report is referred to in the agenda report before you. The report has been reviewed by the lead local flood authority, who are responsible for managing drainage from local watercourses. They conclude that all the matters raised by KRS are to be dealt with by the planning conditions which they have recommended, which is the normal way of dealing with detailed matters. The flood risk assessment and the drainage strategy provide for site attenuation and mitigation and demonstrate that there will be no increased risk of flooding arising from the development. There may also be some benefits to the surrounding area, as the applicant is willing to undertake a conditions survey and remove any potential blockage in the section of the culvert around Rockwood Close. The report before you also refers to a late request by the East Lancashire NHS Trust for £161,000 towards health provision to be used for revenue funding for acute care, which is hospital-based funding. This was a very late request, but has been fully considered. And a legal opinion has also been obtained from council. The agenda report explains in full the reasons why this request would not be lawful, and as such this request has not been put to the applicant. The proposal would deliver a good quality housing scheme on a site that is allocated for this purpose. The Town and Country Planning Act requires decisions to be made in accordance with the development plan unless there are material considerations which would outweigh this. There are no material considerations in this case which would outweigh this finding, and as such the NPPF states that the application should be approved without delay. Thank you, Chair.
Are any members wishing to?
We have, Chair, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Birtwistle have requested to speak.
Yeah, so if we take Councillor Kelly first.
Okay, thank you. when I first got all this paperwork, your instinctive reaction is that it's just a NIMBY thing from the residents, not in my backyard. There's a lot of houses up there. I mean, I remember when all that was fields where the houses are now, never mind this one they want to develop on as well. But clearly the Speaker has done his homework and got together with a lot of others. They've actually put time and effort and money into doing these surveys, which shows the level of their concern. It was an exceptionally good speech from Mr. Waddington. A serious concern has to be the flooding. The houses, it's not the immediate houses there, it's quite a bit lower down where obviously the water channels. I mean, I've been there with a lady who was knee deep in her kitchen on Rockwood Close, and it's not the only time, it's happened a few times. The residents commissioned that independent hydrology report. You know, quite a lot of expense to themselves, but it does show the level of their concern. I'm assuming everybody's read it and picked up on the discrepancies between the developer's report and on that one. And I know the residents submitted some photographs of the regular flooding. I think probably one of the biggest concerns is about the overdevelopment for the access. Much has been made of the access issue, but Standon Hall Drive, it's probably 3/4 of a mile from the main road up a very narrow estate road to the new development. Although all the houses do have drives, there's a considerable amount of parking on pavements, on the curbside. And if you go up there, which I do quite frequently because we have a notice board up there, the councillors have a notice board up there, so I do go up there a lot. I don't know how construction traffic would actually get there. Never mind when the 100 and whatever houses are there, the construction traffic would have a problem actually getting up there. If anybody's been to look, if you've been to look since you got these papers, of course, we've been in lockdown. People haven't been going to work, the schools have been closed. So actually you haven't seen the problem at the little roundabout at the top of Lane Head, just near St James's School, where the access is to Standon Hall Drive. That is a real bottleneck. And there have been loads and loads of small accidents and little bumps. Nothing particularly serious that's needed ambulances, but plenty of little bumps. I've been to look a couple of times in the last few weeks, but obviously you're not getting a true picture because the school, which is 50 yards away, is closed. People aren't going to work. People would have to use the cars all the time for that development. The buses are about a good half a mile away, very infrequent, down a steep hill. So if you've either got to walk down the steep hill to get the bus or back up it, people are going to use the cars without a doubt. School numbers, which obviously you all know is something I know a lot about. Every year for 20 years, children who live at our side of town have had a problem with schools. At the moment, we're doing appeals. You probably know I'm chair of governors at Unity. The number on the report says that there's 1,211 children in Unity. In September, we will have 1,268. So actually the LCC figures are not right. As Mr. Waddington had said before, local children aged 10 and 11 have been allocated schools in Barnoldswick. That's 3 bus rides away for a 10 and 11-year-old. They'd have to leave home soon after 7 in the morning. That absolutely cannot be acceptable. The primary schools, they're both full. I know there's some talk about the money being given, you know, to LCC. I would like an absolute assurance that if this happens, the money will go to the local schools and it won't just go in LCC's pot and be spent somewhere in Lancashire. £800,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in terms of building extensions and making schools bigger, it really isn't very much. One of the things as well that's not been taken into account with the education stuff that we're finding part of the Burnley Education Trust is that the schools in Burnley have really improved. And on the back of that, people don't want to send the children out of town. They're opting more and more to keep the children in Burnley, which is something some of us have striven for years and years. And suddenly we're saying, well, actually, there aren't any places, so, tough luck. I know the land in question is allocated for house building in the local plan, which some of us didn't vote for. But it is the last piece of land that creates a barrier between Burnley and Briarcliff. In a housing area so big, when you get this estate added on to the others, there'll be no community attachment. It'll be far, far too big. And what's happened in the last few months has shown that those kind of community attachments and community spirits are absolutely vital to people's well-being. I appreciate that Burnley wants high quality housing. Of course we do, but this is not the right place. And I would request without prejudice that if the application is approved, a condition is put on that an independent flood risk and hydrology report is undertaken, if only to reassure residents who are clearly very concerned. I will also be asking for a named vote. Thank you, Chair. Frank. Can't hear you, Frank.
Yeah, it's all right. I was muting and I was being unmuted, or the other way around. Councillor Birtwistle.
And then Councillor Hosker's asked if he could speak as well after Councillor Birtwistle, Chair.
Right, yeah, fine. Yeah, Councillor Birtwistle.
I'll unmute you now, Councillor Birtwistle. There you go.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Chairman. Could I first off by saying that this application was turned down last time on the grounds of traffic congestion, and I would have thought if somebody else was putting an application in for an estate of this size in this area, they would have certainly made some attempt in altering the proposed access to the estate. The only suggestion that they've made is there will be a few less houses, so hence probably 30 less cars accessing the estate. We had a long argument at last meeting about the access facilities which are available in that area. Councillor Kelly has already alluded to the fact that Standing Hole Drive is very narrow, very windy and quite steep, and double parking and parking on pavements is prevalent all the time, as in all the estates that are built around Burnley. They were built in the times when people had one car, not three cars, and hence the access to this site is to say the least difficult. To say what it actually is virtually impossible. Now, it was turned down last time on the grounds of SP1, IC1, IC2, and on the policy framework of 2019, the National Policy Framework of 2019. At the time, our legal officer took comment of that and said it was quite illegal for us to turn it down on those grounds. We weren't being frivolous, we weren't being difficult, and he accepted that was a reasonable reason to turn it down. That reason still applies. The change to the plans have not alleviated this estate, not alleviated the problems in this development. And this development still has the problems that they had before on access, which I think is probably the most important thing. So I would move that this planning application is turned down on the grounds of SP1, IC1, IC2, and National Policy Framework of 2019, which relates to the access of this site, which we all agree, I think anybody with any brains would agree, is near enough impossible. I so move that it's turned down on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Birtwistle. We've got Councillor Hosker, but before I move to Councillor Hosker, just wondered if there's anyone would wishes to second councillor Birtwhistle's move to reject?
I'd be happy to second it.
Right, okay. So, right, we'll move on to councillor Hosker.
Councillor
Is it-
Hosker, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Right, thank you, Chair. It's right when this application come before us last time, when we turned it down last time, I thought we had perfectly good cause to turn this application down. I agree with Gordon Birtwhistle's comments. Nothing's changed. And I still feel that there's a flood risk. There's no schools, and why should people have to travel 3 or 4 miles to another school? It's unfair, unrealistic. The traffic, I'm a taxi driver, as you know. I've been up that area when school times are hard, and it can take me a good 20 minutes to do a 2-minute journey. The traffic up there, the parking on pavements has been told tonight, and as such, it's not helping the pedestrians having to walk on the road to avoid traffic that's part of pavements. Your disabilities, people with disabilities, wheelchairs and prams, are at a disadvantage because of the car parking facilities. So I'm going to go against this application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Hosker. Have we any more speakers?
Councillor Anwar would like to speak.
Right, councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard from colleagues, this application has been to us before, and it was refused. And in terms of what might having looked at it and seen the what's in the application, there's elements of the application that I don't agree with. And it's been touched on by other colleagues around education, the flooding issue, traffic congestion, and even the number of houses. Even though from 130 to 117, I don't think that's a massive reduction. Whilst I welcome that the full contribution to the education contribution will be made, so I welcome that. But before I can make a decision, the question that I've got is sort of twofold. And I know Councillor Birtwhistle just mentioned a number of reasons why this can be refused, this application. But is there a planning reason? And this is for the officers. Is there a planning reason for us to refuse this application? And what happens if it does get turned down, and we don't grant planning permission for it now? Can the applicants then take the original application to appeal and get that approved? And that's my concern, is what would happen then, and would we end up with 130 properties as opposed to 117? So I just like clarity on that, if you please.
Yeah, thanks, councillor Anwar. Would legal like to respond to that, or would Ms. Phil?
I
Well,
would-
sorry, can I just, I think Janet's trying to speak, so if I just got in first. Yeah, I will respond, but I think that's more appropriate at once the debate's got to its conclusion, then everything can be dealt with in terms of the legal advice. And I will be calling on the members at that time to take that legal advice in private. But yes, if Janet could give her views in relation to those aspects, that'd be good.
Right, yeah, thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. I think at this stage, what I'd like to do is just to respond to some of the questions that have been raised, including the last question by Councillor Anwar, and some of the things that have been mentioned. I think they do need a response. First of all, Councillor Kelly mentioned the discrepancies between the drainage reports. Well, we can't give them the same status, the drainage reports. The drainage report that was submitted by the applicant was a flood risk assessment and a drainage strategy. Now, the report that was submitted on behalf of the objectors isn't a flood risk assessment. All it is a critique of the assessment that was submitted by the applicant. So, for instance, the report before you lists the objections that they've come up with, which are based on them drawing upon any shortcomings they think that the assessment has. And most of the shortcomings they mention are things which wouldn't be expected to be brought up now in detail. You'd expect them to be dealt with as conditions because they involve such complex issues and calculations and so forth. So as far as those two reports, we can't give them the same status. The first is an assessment and the second is a critique. And on that, I would just conclude that all those issues that were brought up by the objector's statement have been adequately addressed and answered by the flood risk consultant who submitted the report by the applicant, and that's in the report before you as well. So all those points have actually been answered and dealt with. I don't consider there to be any outstanding points in terms of those discrepancies that Councillor Kelly referred to. Secondly, in terms of the access, it was said that the access is a very narrow road. Obviously, the residents who live there consider it to be a narrow road. It isn't very narrow compared to similar residential roads. It's a road which is subject to a 20-mile-an-hour restriction. It's a residential street and it has the characteristics of that. There are parked cars on the street, even though there are driveways to most properties, but that's because driveways may be for one car only, occupants may have more than one car, or people may prefer to park on street rather than to park on some of the driveways which tend to be quite steep. So that is just a local situation in that sense. But the important thing is that there is visibility for cars through any parked cars, that there's what we call intervisibility, so that drivers can see and stop and wait for a car to come through before proceeding. And there's no, there's no records of accidents arising from parked cars. That wouldn't be something that would be able to stand up, appeal and be a valid reason for objecting to the development. The Highway Authority are satisfied with the proposed access from Standon Hall Drive. Councillor Kelly also referred to lots of bumps and small accidents occurring, but nothing particularly major at the junction of Standon Hall Drive and Briarcliff Road. That again isn't something that would be a reason to object to the development. Councillor Kelly also said that people would use their cars all the time and that they wouldn't use public transport, which was half a mile. It was half a mile from buses. Actually, the site is within 200 metres of the nearest bus stops. And obviously, with the new pedestrian links that were provided from the site through Curdale Street, Camp Street, then there would be access to bus stops on Briarcliff Road. There are also bus stops on Standon Hall Drive, which serve the local area. Obviously, there's bus facilities into Burnley. There's also bus services in the other direction to Marsden Heights and beyond. It is reasonably well served by public transport. The service from Briarcliff Road is half an hourly from 7 AM in the morning to evening period, around about 8 o'clock. So it's relatively well served by public transport. The applicants also submitted a travel plan and that sets out measures that would be used to try and encourage people to use cycles, buses, sustainable means of transport, and that is a tool that is a recognised tool for reducing car traffic, and that should also be taken into account. It was also referred to as problems with schools, and that some children are having to go as far as Barnoldswick. I can assure you that if the contribution was accepted, which is £852,000, that will be used in the local area. And I can assure you of that because the legal agreement that it would be necessary to receive that contribution would bind the contribution to being used in the local area. What normally happens is that we ask Lancashire County Council which schools they would like that money to be used for. They first check which schools would be able to accept expansion. In the previous application, you might remember that the schools that were identified were a school just on in Briarfield, and a school, primary school in Briarfield, and the secondary school at Unity, both of which would benefit from the contribution. But it would be up to Lancashire County Council as the education authority to name which schools it wanted the money to go for, and then we would ensure that it is used for those schools. So it would benefit schools in the local area, and of course then it would ensure that that pupils were able to go to the nearest school possible, and may in turn help to reduce the amount of traffic, the amount of the distance that children are travelling to school. The last thing that Councillor Kelly mentioned was that she said that the development is not in the right place. Well, as a principle, unfortunately it's too late to make that statement because the local plan, which was subject to consultation, etc., over many years, allocates that site for residential development, and as such, that can't be backtracked in any way. So the site is allocated for residential development. So it's not a question of not accepting residential development. It's a question of making sure the development that takes place there is the right development and adds to the good quality of housing stock that we want in Burnley. So the question that Councillor Anwar raised about the appeal, and I would just reiterate what I said before, is that an appeal has been lodged already on the previous application that was refused by the council in November last year, the application for 130 dwellings. That appeal has been lodged. The inspectorate have confirmed that the appeal is valid, so that appeal is now underway. If that appeal was successful and this application was also approved, then the applicant would have the choice of implementing either permission. But in this case, the applicant has actually said that if this application is approved, then he would withdraw the current appeal. So I hope that answers your questions for now, but if there's anything else, let me know.
Right, thank you very much, Janet. Have we any more members wishing to speak?
We have Chair. Councillor Graham has requested to speak,
Yeah.
and then Councillor Councillors Birtwistle and Kelly have asked if they could speak again.
Yeah, so, yeah,
So Councillor Graham first.
Councillor Graham, yeah.
I've unmuted you, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to repeat some of what Janet's just said. I was making my notes before Janet spoke, but just to reiterate, and I will have said this before in November last year when we considered the previous application. The issue as to whether or not this site is suitable for housing has already been determined. We had a thorough examination of its suitability for housing in the local plan examination in public. And the inspector will have looked at all the issues that have been raised by objectors this time, including whether it was accessible by transport, and whether it was suitable drainage wise, whether the wildlife issues were an issue. So it's a site that's essentially got outline planning permission already for housing. So when we refused the previous application last November, I thought we were on sticky ground then, and that the applicants would appeal and they would probably win the appeal. I still think that. The applicants have said that they will halt that appeal if this application is approved. If this current application is refused, they will continue to pursue the previous application, and that previous application had 130 houses on it. This application's got 117 and more open space, better surroundings for both the existing residents of the nearby estate and the new residents that will be living on this estate. So I don't think that we would, well, I'm pretty sure we would not win any kind of appeal against these developments. And I think that it's really up to members, but do you want 130 houses on that site or do you want 117? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Graham. We can move on now to Councillor Kelly. I would ask if you make it, make it quite brief, as you've already spoken once. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. I just wanted to come back on a couple of things. At Unity, we've been told that we've got to take 60 extra children, 30 this year and 30 next. We've been promised an extension. The plans haven't even gone in yet. We've got this September 2021, we will have 1,298 children in a building for 1,050. This week, as I said, appeals are going on. We're going to get some more with the best will in the world. Although we haven't got room for them, I've got every sympathy with those people who want to send them. That is a massive problem. The other thing I would just disagree with quite strongly is about the bus links. Talking about going through Saxonfield Street, which I know extremely well because it's where my mum lived. It's probably, I don't know, half, 3/4 of a mile that way to a bus stop. The bus, our last bus into Braycliffe is about 7 o'clock in the evening. They're infrequent during the day. There's another bus route which goes along Hillingdon Road, similar half-mile walk to the bus. People will absolutely, definitely use their cars on that narrow road, which is unsuitable. And that's my biggest concern. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor Kelly. And Councillor Birtwistle, if you could also please make it brief. Councillor Birtwistle.
I've unmuted you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Just very, very briefly, normally when developers build a new estate, like the one on Kidrow Lane or on major estates, they come in from substantial roads. They don't build an estate as an addendum to an existing estate where the roads were built as estate roads. They are narrow roads. The roads were built to service the estate that is there now, not to service virtually doubling the size of the existing one. I believe it is dangerous. It is a wrong thing to do, to use existing estate roads, not main roads, estate roads. I mean, Helena Road is like a through road, but it's only a very narrow road. But Stanley Hall Drive comes off that into the estate. And I stick to my view that we should turn this down for Councillor Anwar's benefit on SB1, as we did last time, IC1, IC2, and the National Planning Framework of 2019. It was turned down on those last time, and I believe that things haven't changed. If they'd have found a new way into the development, and we had a completely separate road in from another area, then it would have been a different ball game. But you can't build an additional estate onto an existing one using the infrastructure of the existing one. It just isn't possible. So I stick to my guns, and I have proposed it's turned down on those grounds. And Councillor Kelly's seconded that. So I would ask you, Chairman, to take a vote on it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Birtwistle.
Chair,
Yes,
we have Councillors Anwar and Hosker who have requested to speak again, and we also have Councillor Harbour who has requested to speak for the first time.
right. Well, perhaps if we take Councillor Harbour, I will take everyone. Obviously, if you're speaking twice, I will ask you to be brief. But I'll give Councillor Harbour the floor.
You're unmuted, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I just say, Chair, that as far as impacting on people's lives, yes, this estate is going to impact on people's lives. Let's not hide away from that. But in my opinion, it will not be as severe as people are making it out to be. We talk about this estate and the access ways into this estate. I've been up there now on 3 occasions. Once, as Councillor Kelly said, during lockdown, which is a fair comment. Funnily enough, I found it more busier during lockdown than I did when I went up on the other 2 previous occasions. There isn't an area in town, anywhere in the borough, which doesn't have hotspots at certain times of day. And this area is no different. If we look at the report itself, all the statutory bodies have been consulted, all of them. And all of them have no reason to turn this application down. Local flood authorities, Environment Agency, highways. Now, we asked what were different between this report and the previous report. As I understand it, highways have had a second look at it, and they conclude again that there is no reason to turn this down. Councillor Kelly fondly remembers when all that area used to be fields. And I should imagine when applications went in, we had the very same arguments. So it's already been said, it's in the local plan. I appreciate that some members don't like that local plan. I also appreciate that I think at one time that I'm not sure whether a review going on about it over this last 6 months since we had the new administration in. And the administration, as far as I understand it, have confirmed that local plan. So it's there. You know, let's be honest about it. Wherever we go with an application for a new housing development, there is always opposition to it. And what we should remember as borough councillors, I appreciate ward councillors might have a different argument, but as borough councillors, we're there to act for the interest of the borough. And I feel strongly that this development of quality homes is something what this town desperately needs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harbour. I've been asked, I haven't forgotten about Councillor Hosker and Anwar, but Councillor Payne has indicated to speak. So I think in the light of fame, in order to give the first speakers the chance to speak, I'd like to allow Councillor Payne to speak. And then Oscar and Anwar.
Thank you, Frank.
Right.
I just want to know what the legal point is on all this. So I think we can go around the houses listening to everyone's opinion, but until we've got David's opinion and the legal stance that we are at with the council, I can't make a decision on this. So as eloquent as a lot of the speaking is, I think we're just chasing our tails. Let's listen to David and get a proper legal view on this, please. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Payne. Yeah, we will be. I will be bringing David Talbot in very shortly, hopefully. But if Councillor Oscar would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Chair.
ask you to make it brief, please, Alan.
Well, I'll make it as brief as I can, Chair. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I agree with Councillor Harbour, which is surprising. But at the end of the day, we had to serve the people of Burnley. And I don't feel by voting in favour of this application, we'd be supporting them. I think turning this application down would be supporting the people of Burnley. And I still haven't had an answer regarding when cars are parked on pavement parking, how people with disabilities and plans are able to get round. And I also note there's not enough medication, doctors, places in doctors. And then what about this in places in schools? What about the coronavirus? Have we not, all this decision about these schools were made before this coronavirus come up, if I'm not correct? And maybe they want bigger places and more spaces out to space people out in schools. Might be another issue. And the last thing I'm going to make is this. And it's surprising, but if this application gets passed tonight, any funding what comes in favour to Burnley gets spent in Pendle. Can you answer that one? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oscar. And with Councillor Anwar, if you could come in, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very quickly, I just wanted to say what Councillor Payne said. I think for me, the difficulty is making that decision, but I would need that legal advice on where we stand legally on the points that I raised earlier on. With regards to just a little bit of clarity around the education, I think I understand, and like I said, I welcome that the full contribution will be made. But in terms of school places, the way that they're allocated is actually that once this development is built, if it is approved, then what will happen is the children that would then apply, it's the children that live closest to a local school would be given a place to go and attend at that school. So it wouldn't mean that these children would have to travel so many miles. If a place was available, they would be able to go apply if the places were available to the nearest school in that area. And then just to come back on Councillor Oscar's point about parked cars on pavements, I think you can go to any street in the borough and there will be parked cars on every single street. So, but thank you.
Right, yes, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on now to David Talbot, wishes to speak and give committee some legal advice.
Yes, Chair, we need to move in, sorry, Chair, to interrupt. We need to move into a private session to receive the legal advice. And so if we could move the resolution to transfer the application to the confidential part of the agenda in order to receive information in respect of which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings. So could we stop the stream for the public?
MJ, oh, MJ? Yeah, we're now live again.
Right, thank you, Alison. Right, we're at the stage now. We have a move and a seconder for the rejection of this this application. Councillor Birtwistle would like to just tell us exactly what we're refusing on. I know you've already mentioned it.
Chair, I can confirm it if you like. It was on SP1, IC1, IC2, the National Planning Framework of 2009, which relates to the access to this site. Is that correct, Councillor Birtwistle?
That is absolutely spot on.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much for that.
Sorry, the head of housing has requested that we just refer that to Mrs. Philbin to just comment on those reasons for refusal.
Thank you. Those reasons for refusal, I'm not clear exactly whether or not, because the policies are the same as what was quoted in the refusal for the previous application. I'm not sure whether or not the intention would be to use the same reason for refusal, or if it's a different reason for refusal. Perhaps Councillor Birtwistle could just confirm that for me, please.
Yeah, Councillor Birtwistle.
I'll unmute you, Councillor.
Right. Well, my view is that the scheme is very little to the original scheme, and as such, the same reasons to reject this are basically the same reasons why we rejected the original one, as the scheme is no different. The access to the site is still the same. The number of houses has only been marginally reduced, and the issues that this will throw up due to the excess traffic, both winter, summer, and everything that goes on up there in bad times, all those things still apply. So I still believe that the same reasons for rejecting the original one, which are planning reasons, I believe that they still stand for this application. And as such, that's the ones I've used.
Okay. Okay. Could I just comment? Could I just comment then, please, on that? First of all, the test has to be whether or not the impact is severe.
So, Janet, could you
Yeah.
just pause there? We've lost somebody from the meeting, so I just need to check who that is.
Councillor Istriak.
Just bear with me. Sorry, I'm trying to check the list. It's Councillor Ishtiak. Chair, could we move to adjourn for 2 minutes so that we can find out what's happened? Just bear with me. I think I've got him on the phone.
Anne?
Sorry, we can hear Catherine.
Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Chair?
Yeah.
Yes, Sue.
Yeah, we could hear other conversations going on.
I know it was Catherine, I think.
That's...
Not on mine.
No, I'm on my own. I've only got the dog here, but
Not mine either.
Yes, I think it is.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Right, I can confirm that all the members that were present are now present again.
Right.
Chair, can I just interrupt just before Janet speaks? The reason for refusal of the last application is set out on page 18 of the current report. Before Janet speaks, it'd be worthwhile, I think, for Councillor Birtwistle to confirm that that wording in the third paragraph on page 18 of the report is the wording that he would suggest for the refusal reason. I think that's what he's saying, but it might be worthwhile to get that confirmed.
Thank you. Chair, would it be a good idea for me to just read out the reason for refusal for the last application?
Yes, please, John. Yeah.
Everyone can see exactly why it was refused. It says the proposal would result in an unacceptable impact on highway safety as a result of introducing a significant number of additional vehicle movements to the locality, which would exceed the capacity of the existing local transport infrastructure and fails to provide an adequate means of mitigating the impact. As such, the proposal is therefore contrary to policies SP1, IC1 and IC2 of the local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. So the reason for refusal is based on the impact of additional vehicle movements on the capacity of the existing local transport infrastructure, which is to be it is a vague statement. It doesn't actually say that the access from Standon Hall Road is unacceptable, and it doesn't actually indicate what within the infrastructure network would be over capacity. So it doesn't, for instance, identify which junctions the council is concerned about. So it is a very vague reason for refusal. My advice would be to look at the recommendation of the LCC Highways, the local highway authority. They say that the impact from the development would not be severe, and it has to be severe in order to make a substantive reason for refusal that would stand up at appeal. And as such, I would have to advise members that that isn't a valid or a considered reason for refusal.
Oh, I think at the last meeting, I mean, I've been asked about this. I think at the last meeting, the residents of the area had a very substantial traffic management report produced by a highly professional person. And our legal officer, David Talbot, believed that it was a professional report, and he was happy to accept it as a reasonable reason for using it to turn the application down. The report disagreed wholeheartedly with Lancashire County Council, and we were advised that it was probably a better report than what the County Council one was. Now, possibly on this occasion, the County Council have got the finger out and gone and looked at it and changed their mind. But I still believe the report that was delivered by the private expert on behalf of the residents last time still stands, and I still believe there will be substantial traffic issues if this goes through. So I stick to the reason for refusal that I put, and it's down to the committee to make the decision. That's what we call democracy. That is my view, and I'm sticking to that. So people can now happily go and vote on it after they've had the advice of all the officers of the borough.
Right, thank you.
Chair, I think
yes.
I think Janet wanted to respond to that comment.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I just want to make it absolutely clear that the John Carruthers report that was submitted for the last application highlighted areas where it felt that the transport assessment was inadequate, particularly in terms of 3 junctions which hadn't been assessed. And that was put right in the transport assessment that was submitted for this application. So that has now been assessed and analysed. And that's what the local highway authority have made comments on. The John
So you're
Carruthers
saying they did it
report-
wrong first time and now they're correcting it?
What I'm saying is that the shortcomings that John Carruthers' report identified, if you would consider them to be shortcomings, they have been dealt with. We have not since received any further report from John Carruthers, who was obviously only acting on behalf of the objectors.
Yes, he
He's,
was.
rather than in his own right, he's only been, he was acting purely on the request of the
Chair.
High Field Objection Group. But we have not received anything further to that, in which case those issues we can assume have been adequately addressed.
Chair, we've
Right,
lost
thank
Councillor Ishtiak again.
Oh,
Can I come back, Chair?
if you must.
Well,
yes, of course, Councillor Burks.
This is an important
But we do remember we are keep going over the same ground.
but this is an important issue that's come up now. The Mr. Carruthers' report at the last meeting was accepted as being
Chair.
a legitimate report.
Chair, we either need to pause to allow Councillor Ishtiak to come back into the meeting.
Well, we're not going to vote on it yet.
We need to take the decision that we're going to continue without him.
Chairman, we can't keep it getting interrupted like this. We've got to get on with it.
Well, I agree. I don't know
Right, well, you're the
what is-
chairman. Let's get on with it.
What is the problem with Councillor Ishtiak? Do we know?
His iPad keeps disconnecting from the internet, I think.
Yeah.
Over to you, Chairman.
Well, I think unfortunately, I think we better I think we better go to the vote.
Fair enough.
It's just unfortunate, but we have spent a long time on these meetings with losing people and etc. So I would suggest unless he comes in within the next few seconds, then we proceed.
Well,
Chair?
Sorry, I can ask him to dial in on his phone if his iPad isn't working. So if you could give me a second.
Alison?
Yep.
He's just texted me to say he's trying to get in.
Yeah.
Chair, I can finish what I was saying. We don't need Ishtiaq here for that.
He does need to be here because he won't have heard all of the discussion. He's just dialing in now by phone.
Need to put a shell in it, meter.
Right, I think Councillor Ishtiaq?
Yes, I'm here.
Right, excellent. So can you just confirm that you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Right, and can everybody else hear Councillor Ishtiaq?
We can.
Yeah,
Okay, so that satisfies the requirements of
Yeah,
the
I can hear
meeting.
Okay.
Right, so without any further ado, then apologies for all the delays, but I think it's about time we went to the vote.
Take the vote, Chair.
As we know, we have a mover and a seconder. The vote is for rejection. Naturally, it will be a name vote, and as I say, it's a name vote, and just remind people that if they vote for, they're voting against, or they're voting for rejection.
Correct.
So if you vote for, you're voting for rejection. So if you vote against, it is for the application.
Well,
no.
We'll take it one
at a time.
Yeah.
The refusal losers, we have to go back and take a vote on approval. So we'll do
Yeah,
the first
right.
one, the refusal. Is that okay? All right,
Yeah.
Chair. So this is put voting for or against refusal. Councillor Anwar,
Against.
you. Councillor Birtwistle,
For.
Councillor Cant,
For.
Councillor Chow.
No, sorry,
No.
sorry.
You've confused yourself, Councillor.
I have, yes, you're quite right. Yes, it's against.
Against, thank you. Councillor
Terribly
Chowdhury.
sorry.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Councillor
For
Chowdhury,
refusal
you're
or
unmuted.
against.
Councillor Chowdhury, you're unmuted.
Can we start again, Chair?
No.
But we just
No, we
need
can't keep
councillor.
doing this.
There's confusion going on.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Are
Okay.
you voting?
Are you voting for refusal or against refusal?
I'm voting against this refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Emo,
For.
Councillor Graham,
I'm voting against.
refusal. Councillor Hall,
For.
Councillor Harbour,
Against.
Councillor Hosker,
For.
Councillor Ishtiak, Councillor Ishtiak,
Against this refusal.
thank you. Councillor Kelly.
For.
I believe that Councillor Khan was late to the meeting, so he's not voting.
She hasn't arrived.
He hasn't arrived, no, thank you. Councillor Mottershead,
Against.
Councillor Payne,
Against.
Councillor Sumner.
For refusal.
So it's 8 against refusal, so that is not refused. We now need to go to a vote for approval.
When somebody needs to move and second that.
Thank you. I think, yes, Councillor Graham, did you wish to speak on that?
You're unmuted now, Sue.
Oh, I want to move approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor, would anybody second that, please?
I'll second Councillor Anwar.
Well, thank you. Okay, so we'll go for approval now. Councillor Anwar is for or against approval?
For.
For approval. Councillor Birtwistle,
Against.
Councillor Cant,
For.
Councillor Chowdhury,
For.
Councillor Emo,
For.
Graham.
For the approval.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Harbour.
For.
Hosker. Councillor Hosker.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Ishtiak.
For approval.
Councillor Kelly.
Against.
Councillor Mottershead.
For.
Councillor Payne.
For.
And Councillor Sumner.
Against.
Okay.
No,
That's
so-
9. The application is approved, Chair.
Right, yes, thank you very much for everyone's participation. We have another item on the agenda.
No.
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
We're not doing that one. The private,
No, the council advice was taken within the application.
right, that's fine, yeah. So I will then end the meeting. And thank you very much for everyone's patience.
Thank you.
Right.